The last thing my mother said before the whole room went quiet was,
"This cruise is really just for the people who pull this family together." She said it with a champagne flute in her hand and a smile that had been rehearsed in a bathroom mirror. And everyone at the long marina table laughed the soft, agreeable laugh that families use to move past a small cruelty. Behind her, through the glass, a white cruise ship sat against a bright blue morning. The ship I had paid for in 18 silent payments over a year and a half. My name was not on the boarding list taped to the easel by the door. I had checked it twice. And I stood there in my navy coat, holding a printed itinerary that no longer had my name on it. And I understood that I was about to become invisible in a room I had built. Let me back up, because the cruelty only makes sense if you know how quiet the whole thing was. My name is Diane. I am 43 years old, and I keep the books for 3 small businesses. In our town, a dental office, a hardware store, and a landscaping company. I am the person who notices when a number is $9 off. I have been that person my whole life. When I was a girl, I was the one who remembered to pay the water bill when my parents forgot. The one who quietly slid $20 into my little sister's lunch account so she would not be embarrassed at the register. Nobody ever thanked me for it, because I made sure nobody ever knew. That was the deal I made with myself young. I would be reliable, and reliability would be its own reward. It took me 43 years to learn how badly that math works out. The cruise started with my father's face. It was a Sunday 2 winters ago, and he was sitting at their kitchen table looking at a brochure a neighbor had left. A 14-day Mediterranean sailing with balconies and a real anniversary suite. My parents were about to hit their 40th wedding anniversary, and my father, who had spent his whole working life fixing air conditioners in other people's attics, ran his thumb over the glossy picture of the ship, the way a boy touches a bicycle he will never get. He said, not to me, just to the room, "Your mother always wanted to see the water like that." Then he laughed and put the brochure in the recycling. I took it out of the recycling on my way to the car. I did not decide anything yet. I just could not leave it in the trash. I want to be honest about my own motives, because I have turned them over many times since. It was not pure. Part of me wanted to give my parents something they could never give themselves. But part of me, the small, hungry part I do not like, wanted to finally be the daughter who did the impossible thing, the one they would talk about. I wanted, for once, to be seen. I told myself I would keep it a secret and reveal it at exactly the right moment, at a dinner, sliding an envelope across the table, watching my mother's hand come up to her mouth. That fantasy is embarrassing to admit now, but it is also the thing they took from me, so I am going to name it plainly. I wanted the moment. They made sure I never got it. The agency was called Harbor and Cross Travel. A little storefront 2 towns over, with a bell on the door and a woman named Marion who had been booking honeymoons and funerals of a marriage cruises for 30 years. I chose it on purpose. I did not want a website. I wanted a person who would keep a paper trail and keep her mouth shut. Marion was in her 60s, reading glasses on a beaded chain, and when I told her what I wanted to do, she did not gush. She just nodded slowly and said, "So, you're the quiet kind." I did not know what she meant then. I said I wanted to fund a 14-day Mediterranean sailing for my parents' 40th, that I would pay it down over time, and that my name was to stay off anything my family might see. She wrote it all down in a leather folder with my account as the payer of record. The payments were the easy part, in a strange way. I moved my life down to the studs. I stopped getting my hair cut at the good place. I drove my 15-year-old car another year.
I ate a lot of rice and beans and told my coworkers I was doing a cleanse, which made them laugh. Every month, a payment went from my account to Harbor and Cross, and every month, Marion sent me a confirmation with a running balance. A neat descending number that felt like a countdown to the best day of my life. 4,000, 9,000, 14. By the second winter, the balance line at the bottom of Marion's emails read, "In plain type, paid in full," and beneath it, "Payer of record, Diane." I printed that email and kept it in my kitchen drawer under the takeout. Menus, and some nights, I took it out just to look at it. There were harder months than I let on to anyone. My furnace died in the second January, and instead of replacing it, I bought 2 space heaters and wore my coat indoors and moved a payment to the cruise anyway. Because I had made myself a promise, and I am the kind of person who keeps promises to strangers more faithfully than I keep them to myself. I remember standing at the hardware store, the one whose books I keep, counting out the cost of the space heaters against the cruise balance in my head, and my coworker Sal asking if I was all right because I had gone somewhere behind my eyes. I told him I was fine. I was just tired. I was always just tired. That was my whole vocabulary of pain back then, a shrug and the word tired. And I had used it so long that even I had stopped hearing it as the alarm bell it really was. I did not tell a single soul, not even the friend I trust most. A woman named Priya, who cuts hair and hears everyone's secrets and keeps them like a vault. I wanted the surprise to be perfect, and I had this superstition that if I said it out loud, it would leak or jinx or shrink. So I carried it alone for 18 months, this enormous, warm secret, like a coal I kept in both hands. And there was something almost sweet about that season. I will not pretend there wasn't. On the hard days, I would imagine my mother's face when the envelope crossed the table, and the imagining would carry me. I did not yet understand that a gift you cannot mention is a gift you have already half surrendered. Because a secret is a thing anyone can pick up and put their own on. Name on, and my family has always been good at picking things up. Here is the first thing that should have warned me, and did not. I had planned to tell my parents myself at the anniversary dinner, envelope and all. But families are leaky, and my younger sister Rachel found the edge of the secret before I could give it as a gift. What happened, I pieced together later, was that my mother mentioned to Rachel that Marion from Harbor and Cross had called the house to confirm passport spellings. And Rachel, who has never in her life let a good thing pass through her hands without taking a cut, drove straight to the agency to help coordinate the family trip. She told Marion she was the organizing daughter. She told my parents she had found an amazing deal. And just like that, my quiet gift stopped being mine and became a thing the family was doing, with Rachel at the center of it. You have to understand my sister to understand how this works. So let me tell you about Rachel. She is 38, and she has a gift I have always envied and never had. She can make people feel that being near her is a favor she is doing them. She sells real estate, and she is good at it because she can walk into a stranger's kitchen and within 10 minutes have them apologizing for the countertops. In our family, she is the sun, and the rest of us are told to be grateful for the light. When we were young and I paid the water bill, Rachel was the one who, at dinner, said, "We should really all pitch in more for Mom and Dad," and got praised for the sentiment, while I was the one who had already pitched. I did not resent her then. I told myself she was just louder.
It took the cruise to teach me that loud, over enough years, becomes a kind of theft. So the trip grew. What I had built as a 2-person anniversary gift, Rachel expanded into a 10-cabin family event. My parents, Rachel and her husband, my brother Kevin and his wife, 2 sets of cousins, an aunt. She organized a group chat that I was notably not added to it. She started calling it the Legacy Cruise, which made my stomach turn a little. Every time, though I could not have told you why yet. And through all of it, I kept quiet because I still believed I was going to get my moment. I imagined it even bigger now, the whole family on the deck. And at some point, my father learning that his overlooked older daughter had made the entire thing possible. I was so busy protecting the surprise that I did not notice the surprise being turned against me. The first excuse came in April, and it came from Rachel. Over coffee she insisted on buying, which should have told me something. We were at the cafe near my office, and she stirred her latte for a long time before she said, "So, the cruise. It's getting complicated. The cabins fill up, and honestly, the group rate only held 10, and they went so fast." She let that sit. Then she reached across and squeezed my hand, her rings cold, and said, "I feel awful, but you know how you are? You're so independent. You'd probably rather have the quiet week at home anyway. And someone should be able to check on the house." She smiled like she was giving me a present. I remember I said, "Oh, sure. Of course." Because that is what I say. I am the person who says, "Of course." Marion's paid in full email was in my drawer at that exact moment, and I said, "Of course." I want to tell you I marched home and called Marion and blew the whole thing up. I did not. I drove home and sat in my car in the driveway for a long time. I told myself the story Rachel had handed me because it was a comfortable story, and I was tired. The rate only held 10. I am so independent. Someone should watch the house. I even felt a little noble about it. The martyr feeling I have leaned on my whole life like a bad knee. I made myself a cup of tea, and I did not take the email out of the drawer that night. Because some part of me already knew that if I looked at it, I would have to see what was really happening, and I was not ready. That is the thing about being the reliable one. You get very, very good at not looking. But small things kept snagging, the way a loose thread catches on everything. The next week, Rachel forwarded me the official itinerary, so you can have it. For the house sitting, in case of emergency. It was Marion's document. I recognized the Harbor and Cross header immediately, the little compass logo. Except something was wrong with it. The passenger manifest and the payer line at the bottom had been retyped. Where Marion's originals always read Payer of Record, Diane, this version, the version circulating in my family, read Payer of Record, Family Group, organized by Rachel. I stared at it on my phone at my kitchen counter. It was such a small edit, a few words in a footer that nobody reads. But I read footers for a living, and I felt something go cold and clear in my chest. The way it does when a number is $9 off, and, you just know. That the $9 is the visible corner of something much larger. I did not confront her. Instead, I did what I do. I opened my laptop and I built a timeline, because a bookkeeper's grief always looks like a spreadsheet. I lined up every payment I had made to Harbor and Cross, every confirmation email from Marion, every date. And then I lined up the family group chat, which Rachel had finally added. Me too as house sitter, and I read it from the beginning. And there it was, in plain daylight, weeks of it. Rachel saying, I got us an incredible deal. Rachel saying, I've been putting this together for a year. Don't worry about the money side. I've got it handled. My mother replying with a string of hearts. We are. So lucky to have a daughter like you. My father, I don't know how you did it, sweetheart. My aunt, Rachel, you are the glue of this family. I read that word, glue, and I thought of my mother's champagne toast that had not happened yet, the one about the people who pull this family together. And I understood that a script was already being written, and I was not in it. There was one message in that group chat I kept coming back to, and it was not one of Rachel's. It was from my brother Kevin, harmless, cheerful Kevin, who wrote, So who do we thank for all this? Rachel, you're unbelievable. How did you even afford to front it? And Rachel had answered fast. Don't you worry about the money side. That's my department. Just pack your sunscreen. I read that exchange 4 or 5 times. Front it? My department? She had let my brother believe that she personally had laid out tens of thousands of dollars. And she had done it in a way that could never quite be pinned down, all warmth and deflection, so that later, when I was not there to be asked, the credit would have quietly hardened into fact. I am a bookkeeper. I know exactly how a lie about money is built. You do not build it with a big false number. You build it with a fog. Don't worry about it. A department nobody is allowed to audit. That was the midpoint for me. The night I sat with the spreadsheet and the group chat side by side, and the story rearranged itself. This was not a sad accident of cabin availability. There was no cabin shortage. I checked. There were still cabins available for that sailing the day Rachel told me they were full. This was a construction. Rachel had learned that our parents were getting a cruise, discovered it was already paid for by me, and made a cold, fast decision. She would insert herself as the giver, expand it into a family legacy event with her at the head of the table, and quietly remove the one person whose presence would raise the obvious question of who had actually paid. My exclusion was not carelessness. My exclusion was necessary to her story. I was the only witness who could contradict the glue, so the glue arranged for me to stay home. I did not sleep that night, and by morning, I had gone somewhere strange and calm. There is a particular quiet that comes after the anger burns off, and in that quiet, you can finally think. I understood that I had 2 selves fighting. The old self wanted to keep the peace, to be independent, to house it, to swallow it one more time and be told decades from now at somebody's funeral that I had always been such a giving person. And a new self, one I did not entirely recognize, was standing very still and asking a simple question. What do you actually owe people who erased you from your own kindness? I had spent 43 years believing that love was proven by silence. That morning, I began to suspect that some silences are not love at all. Some silences are just the sound of you being convenient. I called Marion. I sat in my car outside the hardware store on my lunch break, and I called Harbor and Cross. And when Marion answered, I did not even know what I was going to ask until I heard my own voice say, Marion, has anyone changed the payer of record on the Mediterranean booking? There was a long pause. I heard her set something down. She said carefully, No, dear, that doesn't change. The payer of record is the payer of record. Your sister asked me to, actually. She came in and asked me to put the family group as payer on the documents. I gripped the wheel. Marian went on, slower now. I told her I could print a courtesy itinerary.
Any way she liked for the family to look at. But the official balance sheet, the real one, the one that goes in the file and gets read at final settlement, that stays true. That has your name on it. I don't lie in my paperwork. 30 years. I never have. I think that was the moment the plan formed, though I would not have called it a plan. It was more like a decision to stop protecting them. Marian, without knowing it, had just told me that somewhere in the world there existed a single piece of paper that could not be edited. A document with the weight of a business and 30 years of a woman's reputation behind it. And on that paper, my name sat alone under the word balance. I did not have to make a scene. I did not have to scream at a champagne brunch. I only had to make sure that the truth and the family were in balance, the same room at the same time, and let a professional read her own paperwork. I asked Marian one question. The send-off brunch, the one Rachel's organizing at the marina before boarding? Do you attend those? Marian said. I always deliver the final documents in person. Final balance confirmation, boarding passes, the works. Family likes the photo, I said. Please don't change your routine on my account. Here is where I have to be careful, because I do not want you to think I became cruel. I did not send a single angry text. I did not post anything. I did not call my mother and cry, which is what the old Diane would have done. Cried on the phone and then apologized for crying. Instead, I did something that surprised even me. I kept helping. I had already agreed, weeks earlier, to order the big anniversary banner for the brunch, 40 years, in gold letters, and to pick up the flowers. Rachel had happily delegated the boring errands to the house sitter, so I ordered the banner. I picked up the flowers, 2 big arrangements of white roses and eucalyptus. I did it partly because I did not want to punish my father, who had done nothing but touch a brochure and put it in the trash. And I did it partly, I will admit, because I knew I would be in that room, banner in hand, when the paperwork arrived. And there is a kind of dignity in showing up early to a thing you built. The night before the brunch, my mother called me. Not to invite me, understand. To confirm I could water her ferns while they were gone, and to remind me where the spare key was. She was in a wonderful mood, high and bright the way she gets before a party. And near the end, almost as an afterthought, she said, "You know, Diane, you should really come by the send-off in the morning, just to see us off. Rachel's put together something so beautiful. She's just outdone herself. We're so blessed to have a child who thinks of everyone." I stood in my kitchen with the phone against my ear and the drawer with the paid in full email 6 inches from my hand. And I said softly, "I wouldn't miss it." She said, "That's my girl, always so supportive." And she hung up. And I opened the drawer and took out the email and read it one more time. And I was not sad anymore. I was ready. The morning was almost unfairly beautiful. The marina had that scrubbed, glittering look that expensive mornings have, gulls turning over a flat, bright harbor. The ship, enormous and white at the end of the pier, like a building that had wandered out to sea. Rachel had booked the glass-walled event room at the yacht club for the send-off. Brunch, and it looked, I have to give her this, wonderful. There were round tables with linen, mimosas in a pyramid, a slideshow of my parents' wedding photos looping on a screen, and at the front, the 40 years banner I had ordered in the gold letters I had chosen. Rachel stood beneath it, greeting everyone like a bride. accepting hugs, waving off compliments with a modest hand pressed to her chest. My father was in a jacket that did not quite fit anymore, beaming, a little overwhelmed. My mother wore a new blue dress. I carried the 2 arrangements of white roses in through the glass doors and set them on the front table, and I said good morning. And I found a chair near the back, and I waited. For the first half hour, it was almost pleasant, and that was the hardest part. My aunt hugged me and said it was so kind of me to help with the flowers. My brother Kevin, who I do not think ever knew the whole story, waved and pointed at his mimosa like a boy. Rachel drifted past me and said, low and warm, "Thank you so much for grabbing the flowers. You're a lifesaver. We would be lost without our little house sitter," and squeezed my shoulder and moved on before I could answer, which was fine because I did not trust my answer. I sat with my hands in my lap and I watched the door because I knew from a woman with reading glasses on a beaded chain that at some point that morning the glass doors would open and a professional would walk in carrying a leather folder, and that inside the folder, under the word balance, was the truth I had paid for 18 times. Rachel decided to give a speech. Of course she did. She tapped a fork against a glass, and the room hushed, and she stood beneath my banner, and she told our family a story. She said that a year and a half ago she had looked at our tired, hard-working parents and decided they deserved the trip of a lifetime. She said she had moved mountains, that she had saved and planned and negotiated, and pulled every string she had, that it had been the hardest and most rewarding project of her life. She got a little tearful, and she was good at it, and around the room, people put their hands over their hearts. My mother was openly crying now, nodding, mouthing thank you at her golden daughter. And then Rachel lifted her glass and said the line, the one I had somehow known was coming. "This trip is really just for the people who pull this family together, to the people who show up." And the room drank to it. And I sat in the back with the paper trail in my purse, and I did not lift a glass because the glass doors had just opened. Marion came in exactly as she had every day for 30 years, unhurried, reading glasses down her nose, a leather folder under her arm, and a small stack of boarding pass envelopes in her hand. She did not know a war was on. She thought she was arriving to a happy send-off to hand over final documents and pose for a photo. Rachel's face did a quick, complicated thing when she saw her, a flicker of a plan meeting an unaccounted variable. But she recovered and swept forward, all warmth. "Marion. Everyone, this is Marion from the agency. She has our final papers. Isn't this exciting?" She was trying to manage it, to keep her hand on the wheel. Marion smiled and set her folder on the front table, right beside my white roses, and opened it, and said in the pleasant, business-like voice of a woman who reads paperwork aloud for a living, "Wonderful. Before I hand out the boarding passes, I just need to confirm the final balance for our records. If I can have everyone's attention for one moment." And she read it. She did not editorialize. She had no idea she was holding a bomb. She simply read the settlement page the way she had read 1,000 of them, for the file, for the photo, for the tidy end of a long transaction. Mediterranean sailing, 14 days, 10 cabins, anniversary suite included, she said, running her finger down the sheet. Total booking, paid in full. Thank you. And for our records, the payer of record on this account, the sole payer, across all 18 installments, is Diane. She looked up, smiling, expecting applause for a job well done, and she said brightly, "Diane, are you here, dear?" It's very unusual, one person carrying an entire family booking like this. You must be very proud of her. And she lifted the balance sheet slightly. The real one. The one with my name typed clean under the total. And she looked around the silent room for the woman who had quietly paid for everything. I have thought a great deal about the silence that followed, because it was the loudest thing I have ever heard. It was not a gasp. It was a vacuum. Rachel's speech was still hanging in the air. Moved mountains, saved and planned. The people who show up. And into that air, Marian had dropped a single true sentence, and the two things could not both be real. I watched it move across the room like weather. My aunt turned to look at Rachel. Kevin set down his mimosa. My mother, mid-tear over her golden daughter, stopped, and her face did something I had never seen it do, a slow, dawning rearrangement. As she looked from Marian's paper to Rachel to me in the back of the room, and began, at last, to do the math she had never once bothered to do. And Rachel stood beneath my banner, under the gold letters, with her hand still pressed to her chest. And for the first time in her life, she had absolutely nothing to say. I stood up. I did not rush it. I walked to the front, past the round tables and the mimosa pyramid, and I stood beside Marian and her open folder and my white roses. Marian, still not understanding, said warmly, "Ah, there she is." And I said, gently, because I meant it gently, "Thank you, Marian. Your paperwork is perfect." It always is. Then I turned to the room. I did not raise my voice. I have replayed what I said many times, and I am glad it was short. I said, I wanted this to be a gift. I saved for 1.5 years. I ate rice and beans and drove my old car, and I never told anyone because I didn't want thanks. I wanted Mom and Dad to see the water. I looked at my father, whose eyes were wet now for an entirely different reason. And then I was told the cabins were full and I should stay home and water the ferns. So I did the math. And I decided that if I couldn't have a seat, at least the truth could have one. Rachel found her voice then, the way she always does, and it came out too fast and too high. Diane, this is not the place. We can talk about the money side privately. Obviously, we were always going to pay you back. I was going to surprise you. And she stopped, because even she could hear how it sounded, pay you back, surprise you, in a room where she had just spent 5 minutes taking credit for the whole thing. My mother said, quietly, "Rachel." Just her name. But it had a weight in it I had never heard my mother put on Rachel before. 40 years of favoritism cracking down the middle in a single word. And Rachel, cornered, did the thing that finally ended it for her. She got angry at me. "You did this on purpose," she hissed. "You waited. You could have just told me." And I looked at her and I said, "I could have, but you didn't leave me off by accident, Rachel. You left me off on purpose. I just returned the favor with the truth." I want to tell you what I did next because the spec of my own character depended on it. And because the old Diane would have gotten it wrong. I did not tear up the banner. I did not demand my money back in front of everyone. I did not tell my father, who was now openly weeping into his ill-fitting jacket, that his daughters had turned his 40th into a courtroom. I picked up my purse. I said, to my parents only, not to Rachel, "The trip is paid for. It's yours. Go see the water. You earned 40 years of it." And I meant that,
Because whatever Rachel had done, my parents on a balcony over the Mediterranean was the thing I had actually wanted. And I was not going to burn it down to punish the woman who had tried to steal it. Then I said, I'm not coming. Not because there's no cabin. Because I finally understand I've been paying for a seat at a table that never once saved me one. I'm done paying for that seat. And then I left. I walked out through the glass doors into that unfairly beautiful morning, past the gulls and the flat, bright harbor and the enormous white ship. And I did not look back to see whether anyone followed. Nobody did. Not at first. And I found that I was all right with that. I sat on a bench at the end of the pier, and I breathed. I felt the strangest thing, lighter than I had felt in years. As if I had been carrying 2 arrangements of white roses my whole life and had finally set them down on a table where they belonged. Behind me, faintly, I could hear the brunch trying to reassemble itself, the awkward clink of forks, the low, urgent murmur of a family that had just watched its favorite story fall apart. I let it murmur. For once, the fixing was not my job. For a while, I just watched the harbor and let my heartbeat come back down. A young couple walked past me toward the ship with their suitcases, laughing about something, and the woman was reading a printout of their itinerary aloud, mispronouncing the port names, and the man was correcting her, and they were so ordinary and so happy that I felt my throat tighten. I thought about all the versions of that morning that could have happened. The version where I never took the brochure out of the trash. The version where I stood up during Rachel's speech and screamed and became the villain of the story forever, the bitter sister who ruined the anniversary. And the version that had actually happened, where a woman with reading glasses read a true sentence in a plain voice, and I did not have to raise mine at all. I decided, sitting on that bench, that of all the possible mornings, I would not have traded the quiet one. The quiet ones are the only kind that ever really change anything. My father found me 20 minutes later. He walked out onto the pier slowly, his hands in his pockets, and he sat down on the bench next to me without a word, the way he used to when I was small and something had gone wrong, and neither of us knew how to say it. After a while, he said, looking at the ship and not at me, I put that brochure in the trash. I remember doing it. I thought, that's not for people like us. His voice broke a little. And you took it out, didn't you? I said yes. He nodded for a long time. Then he said the thing I had waited 43 years to hear. And I didn't even have to give up a whole cruise to get it, though it turned out I had. He said, I have been looking at the wrong daughter my whole life, and I am so sorry. We sat there and watched the water together until it was time for him to board. They went on the cruise. I want you to know that, because I think some part of the satisfaction is that I did not take it from them. My parents sailed for 14 days across a sea I paid for, and my father sent me a photo every single morning. The sun coming up over a different port, always with the same 2 words underneath. Thank you. And I saved everyone. Rachel did not go. She could not, in the end, stand on that ship as the woman who had planned it all. Not after the whole family had watched the balance sheet with my name on it. She stayed home. I heard she told people the timing didn't work out. I did not correct her. I have found that I no longer need to correct her. The paperwork corrected her. Once, clearly in a glass room by the harbor. And once was enough. A week after they sailed, Kevin called me. He was quiet on the phone in a way he almost never is, and he said, "Diane,
I need to say something, and I need you to just let me say it," he told me. He had believed Rachel. He told me he had toasted her at that brunch and meant it, and that he had gone home afterward and could not sleep. Thinking about all the years, all the water bills and the lunch accounts, the times I had shown up with a casserole when his kids were sick and left before anyone made a fuss. "You've been paying for this family since we were little," he said, "and I never once asked with what." I told him it was all right, and he said, sharp for him, "No, it isn't. That's the whole point. It was never all right, and everybody just decided it was because you let them." I did not have an answer for that. He was correct. I had let them. That was the part I was only beginning to understand, that my silence had not just protected me from thanks. It had trained everyone around me to forget the debt entirely. Things changed after that. Not all at once, the way things really change. My mother started calling me on Sundays, and at first the calls were stiff and full of the wrong words, but she kept making them, and a stiff, honest call is worth more than 40 years of hearts in a group chat. Rachel and I are not close, and I have stopped auditioning to be. What surprised me most was how much smaller my anger got once the truth was out in the open, as if it had only been that big because it was trapped. I did not need her ruined. I never did. I only needed to stop being invisible, and it turns out that being invisible was something I had been helping with. Every time I said, "Of course." Every time I paid quietly and asked for nothing. Every time I mistook being used for being loved. I still keep the books for the dental office and the hardware store and the landscaping company. I still notice when a number is $9 off. But I have changed one rule in my own life, and I want to leave it with you, because if you have listened this far, maybe you are the reliable one in your family too, the one who pays quietly and waits to be seen. Here is what I learned by the water that morning. Generosity given in secret so that someone will finally love you is not generosity. It is a bill you are handing to another person without their name on it, and one day it comes due. And you find out whether they ever meant to pay. Give if you want to give, but give it in the light. Sign your name to your own kindness. And never, ever again buy a seat at a table for people who would not save you one. So let me ask you, wherever you are listening from tonight, in a kitchen, on a bus, in the dark before sleep, have you ever paid, in money or in years, for a love you were only renting? I hope you find your morning by the water. I hope someone reads the balance sheet out loud. And when they do, I hope you have the quiet, unshakable courage to stand up, walk to the front, and finally, after all this time, put your name on the thing you built.